Mr Clennell, thank you so much for joining me. Why is the government waiting for another 2 weeks before perhaps starting to relax some of the restrictions when really it could start acting now?
Well, I guess some state governments are slowly acting now, Andrew, but I tend to agree. I think every day is a body blow to the growing ranks of unemployed and to businesses. And, you know, the most shocking thing that was kind of slipped out there in the Prime Minister's press conference today was that 800,000 more people are on the dole. 800,000 more job seeker applications have been processed since the shutdown, which was a mere 5 weeks ago. And this means, on top of the 713,000 that were identified as unemployed on March 15, 5.2%, that by May we're going to have 12% unemployment, bigger than the recession of the 1990s, bigger than the recession of the 1980s, biggest since the Great Depression, and 1.5 million Australians out of work. Now, it seems to me that governments need to get moving. They've been held up by the teachers' unions and the Victorian government in terms of schools, but they need to get moving on things like restaurants and cafes and social distancing in those venues to get people back to work. I've always advocated a staged approach, but we need to get moving. I mean, this is going to end up the real crisis. We've done fantastically well on the health front. That's welcome. That's good stuff. But you need to be nimble in this crisis. Scott Morrison said you had to shut down for 6 months. You couldn't shut down for 2 to 3 weeks and it would go away. Well, guess what? We have. Not 2 to 3, but 4 or 5. And, OK, you're going to get some more cases as you open up. But if you do it gradually, if you do it carefully, you're going to see you know, a bit of a comeback from the economy, which is so badly wounded. Now, the Prime Minister seems to say you need this app. 2.8 million people have downloaded it before he's confident. That's one of the reasons. But even with that, you have to have it loaded on your phone at the time. So, you know, you can get 4 million people downloading that thing. If they don't have it up on their phone, and many people will forget, it won't work.
That's correct. And really, who's it going to trace right now, given the rate of infections is so low? There's been a battle, you mentioned it already, Victoria in particular, Queensland to some extent. There's been a battle between the states, the hardline ones, and the federal government. How's that actually playing out? What's going on here?
Well, to be honest, I think every state, bar Victoria, wants the kids back at school now. It's moved in the past couple of weeks, but they have to get past the teachers' unions because the last thing they want is a teachers' strike. And it's the teachers' unions who are becoming the stumbling block. I think New South Wales and Queensland will go back. In a staged fashion in New South Wales, it should probably happen quicker. But the bigger problem is this inequality or inequity that it's set up. I mean, Scott Morrison said today, OK, I accept that the premiers run the state school system and fund them so they can do whatever they want, but I fund the private school system and I want them back. And that's what's occurred. They promised them quicker funding from next year to bring it forward, providing they go back into the classroom. And the Catholic school system in New South Wales, for example, I was told by them today, they will have full-time face-to-face teaching by the end of May. Now, the public schools at the moment are probably on a deadline of around the end of June or start of term 3, maybe the end of term 2. So you're going to have kids with face-to-face teaching in private schools doing it for 1 month more than the public schools. An even worse situation than that in Victoria, the whole term difference. If you're in the HSC year or whatever, that's a major disadvantage, and I do find this concerning. There is actually hope at the political level, Andrew, that once the Catholics and the independents go back, the teachers' unions in the public system, their hands will be forced somewhat. And if there's no evidence of outbreaks and that sort of thing, and there wasn't up until the shutdowns, and for some reason it appears children aren't super spreaders or spreaders of this thing and they rarely get it, then I don't see any reason why the schools can't be back sooner than what's being foreshadowed at the moment. But there seems a determination by the Victorian Premier and his Chief Health Officer to hold back on this one, and they may well regret it.
Well, it's interesting when you say that. First of all, of course, the difference with the public school, with the state schools, is that those teachers aren't getting laid off. Those schools aren't going broke. They've got no financial motive to go back to work. The private schools, however, are laying off teachers, are going broke. Now, you mentioned the Morrison government giving a cash advance of $3 billion to the private schools if they go back now. The Victorian government was furious. Have a listen to this.
Expert health advice, not money, should determine whether or not a school fully opens for students, staff and teachers.
Can I suggest a nasty theory to you, Andrew, that the Victorian government and the state school system, the state school unions and all that kind of stuff are quite happy for others to go first, New South Wales to go first, or the private schools to go first, because then they can sit back and say, if it goes wrong, if there's a little spike of infections, aha, see, we told you, we saved you, that there's a little bit of gutlessness going on here. And people who take the risk to reopen the economy will get it in the neck if there's even a slight increase in infections.
Well, if there's a little spike, it wouldn't be a problem. If there were bigger spikes, that would be the problem. The other issue is there are concerns if you open up more retail and open up cafes at the same time as schools, that the school openings will be blamed for the outbreaks when it's actually other facilities. I hope that's not the case in terms of Victoria. It does seem odd to me that Victoria are behind New South Wales on this. I mean, New South Wales have consistently had more cases than Victoria. It would seem to me that Victoria being too conservative when New South Wales have more reason to be conservative than they do. And then you've got a real difference in places like WA and the Northern Territory. Because they shut the borders, they've got no problems at all. And they're basically sending kids to school. Soft opening, they call it in WA, full on in Northern Territory. South Australia too has 95% of kids going. Those states are very lucky they're in the situations they're in. Really the ones with the major dilemmas are New South Wales, particularly, and a bit Victoria. But I do find the obstinance by Victoria concerning. I thought Daniel Andrews was opening the way for lifting restrictions in his comments earlier this week. And I think it would benefit the nation because, you know, kids compete for spots in universities or in NAPLAN or whatever across the country. If Victoria went the same way at the same time as New South Wales, for example, I certainly hope that that is the case.
Well, I think you might be hoping in vain there, Clennell, but thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.